They thought they could bury me under a parking violation, but before this story ends, you'll see how that tiny orange cone became the reason the entire HOA got exposed. It started on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where nothing dramatic ever happens. Sun blaring off the asphalt, coffee cooling in my cup, just another quiet day in our little suburban cul-de-sac. Except, my spot was gone. Now, this wasn't an assigned space, but everyone knew the patch right next to the mailbox had been mine for 5 years. Unspoken rule. Neighborhood tradition. But that morning, sitting there like a smug silver trophy, was a shiny SUV parked diagonally like it owned the street. At first, I thought maybe a visitor, maybe a new neighbor. No big deal. Then I saw it. A decal across the back window, student driver. And standing at the end of her driveway, watching me like she'd been waiting for this moment all week, was Karen. Arms crossed, sunglasses glinting, smirk already loaded. Next to her, her teenage son clutching a learner's permit like it was his golden ticket. I rolled down my window. Tried to keep my voice calm. "Hey Karen, I usually park there. Mind if your son moves the car?" She smiled that condescending, "I run this neighborhood" kind of smile. "He needs the practice," she said sweetly. "You can park somewhere else. It's not like your name's on it." I laughed. Thought she was joking. She wasn't. So I let it go. Parked a few houses down. Told myself it wasn't worth it. But the next morning, same thing. Then the day after. And this time, she'd upped the game, a bright orange cone planted right in the spot like a tiny flag of conquest. Now, I don't enjoy confrontation, but I do enjoy rules. So I looked them up: HOA bylaws. Clear as daylight, no personal reservations, no cones, no blocking public parking. I printed it, highlighted it, taped it neatly to her cone. The next morning, the cone and my paper were gone. But taped to my front door? A yellow envelope stamped "Notice of Violation." Apparently, I was the one harassing a resident. That's when it hit me: Karen hadn't just broken the rules. She'd weaponized the HOA. But what she didn't know, my sister-in-law worked for the state attorney's office. And that's when the real game began. When I read that violation notice, I almost laughed. It accused me of parking harassment, as if I'd keyed her car instead of posting a rule sheet. That's when I called the HOA office, expecting logic. But then I heard a voice on the other end. "Mr. Thompson," the man said flatly, "we've received multiple complaints about your behavior." And from his tone, I knew. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be a setup. Because when I asked, "Multiple? From who?" Karen and her reflection, he didn't laugh. "Mr. Thompson," he said in that slow, polished voice, the kind that sounds polite but smells like trouble, "we've received multiple complaints about your behavior." I almost laughed. Multiple? From who? Karen and her reflection. He didn't laugh. He didn't even breathe. That's when I realized this wasn't a conversation. It was a warning. "We take these reports seriously," he continued. "You're on notice. One more infraction and we'll fine you." And right there it clicked. Karen wasn't just pulling strings. She was the strings. 4 months, she'd been building her little empire: cookies for board meetings, barbecues for community bonding, volunteering for every fake-friendly project. The woman had practically sweet-talked her way into the HOA's bloodstream. So, I changed tactics. No more arguing. No more notes. Just quiet observation. Let her think she'd won. But Karen? She wasn't done playing queen. 3 mornings later, I walked out to find a blinding orange sticker slapped across my windshield: "Unauthorized vehicle." My car. Parked in front of my own house. I took photos, every angle, every sticker, and emailed them straight to the HOA office. Minutes later, I got a reply. "This vehicle is in violation of community parking regulations." Regulations? There weren't any for street parking. That's when I called Amy. My sister-in-law. assistant to the state attorney. Calm, sharp, and armed with the one thing Karen didn't have: authority. Amy flipped through my photos, scanned the emails, and smirked. She's overstepping. You're on public access property, not HOA maintained land. This isn't just petty, it's a misuse of power. Within an hour, Amy had drafted a letter on official letterhead. Clean. Professional. Devastating. It outlined jurisdiction limits, state penalties, and exactly how far the HOA had crossed the line. 5 copies printed. 1 to the HOA office. 1 to George, their fearless leader. And 1 carefully taped to Karen's mailbox. The silence that followed? Beautiful. 3 full days. No cones. No stickers. No Karen. I thought it was over. Until Friday evening, when I pulled into my driveway and saw them waiting. Karen. Her son. And 3 HOA board members. All standing shoulder to shoulder, clipboards in hand like they were filming CSI, Suburbia. She smiled that same smug smile. "We're conducting an inspection," she announced. "You've been reported for several violations." Amy, standing by the window, whispered, "Don't say a word. Let them dig their own hole." So I didn't. I just watched as the self-appointed HOA avengers shuffled papers, muttered laws they didn't understand, and tried to look official. Then George, the president, cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "we've received evidence of multiple violations: obstruction of community property, harassment of a resident, and unauthorized signage." Amy stepped out onto the porch, calm as ever. And the look on Karen's face when she saw her? That was the moment the entire inspection started to unravel. Why would a group of neighbors march into my driveway like they were serving a warrant when the only crime I'd committed was parking my own car? I raised an eyebrow, trying not to laugh. "Signage?" I said. "You mean the paper I taped to a cone?" Karen crossed her arms, voice dripping with fake authority. "You've been causing distress, recording residents, and creating a hostile environment." I blinked, pretending to be confused. "Recording? Really?" She smirked. "Several neighbors saw you with your phone. We all know what you were doing." I couldn't help it, a laugh slipped out. "Yeah," I said. "Taking pictures of an illegal sticker on my car. You know, evidence tends to require cameras." And that's when Amy stepped out onto the porch. Calm. Confident. Dangerous. She folded her arms, her tone polite but razor-sharp. "Is this an official HOA hearing?" George froze mid-sentence. "It's an informal inspection." Amy smiled. The kind of smile that said, "I was hoping you'd say that." "Oh, good," she replied smoothly. "Because if it were official, you'd need to file notice 72 hours in advance under State HOA Statute 72305. And you'd also need written consent to enter private property, which, just so we're clear, you don't have." The silence hit like a gust of cold wind. You could actually hear the confidence leave the group. Karen's smirk cracked. The board members exchanged glances. And Amy? She stepped forward, slow and steady, holding a folder. "While we're here," she said, "I have a few documents of my own. My office recently reviewed several HOA complaints from this neighborhood, many of which, interestingly enough, came from the same personal email account." Karen's face turned red. George tried to recover. "That's not relevant." "Oh, it's very relevant," Amy countered. "Because filing false reports through an HOA, with intent to intimidate a resident, is considered harassment under state law. And that, Mr. President, is our jurisdiction." You could have heard a pin drop. Even Karen's son started backing away, slowly heading toward their SUV. Karen's voice trembled. "You're threatening me?" Amy didn't flinch. "No, Karen," she said softly. "I'm informing you." That was the kill shot. Within minutes, the so-called inspection dissolved. Clipboard snapped shut. shoes shuffled awkwardly down the driveway. Karen didn't say another word. For the first time in weeks, peace returned. No cones. No stickers. No Karen. But deep down, I knew peace was temporary. Because people like Karen don't lose quietly. 2 days later, I found a certified envelope in my mailbox, formal hearing notice. Stamped. Signed. 5 pages long. It read like a bad courtroom drama: failure to comply, hostile conduct, endangering community harmony. I half expected them to accuse me of disturbing the peace of the HOA gods. Amy skimmed through it, shaking her head. They're bluffing, she said. But they've just made their biggest mistake. So, the stage was set. Wednesday. Community clubhouse. When I walked in that night, the air was heavy, like the calm before a storm. Karen sat front and center beside George, whispering like co-conspirators. Half the neighborhood showed up for the show, coffee cups in hand, eyes glued to me like it was primetime TV. And as I took my seat beside Amy, badge glinting under the fluorescent light, I could already tell. They had no idea what was about to hit them. I knew walking into that hearing, it wasn't just about a parking spot anymore. It was about power, principle, and proof. George cleared his throat, trying to sound in control. This hearing concerns the repeated disruptive behavior of Mr. Thompson, including harassment, violation of parking policy, and inappropriate conduct toward the HOA board. He didn't even get to finish. Amy placed a thick binder on the table with a heavy thud that echoed through the clubhouse. Before this continues, she said evenly, her tone like tempered steel, I'd like this entered into the record. It contains a full timeline of communications between my client, Mr. Thompson, and the HOA, along with photographs, public property maps, and state statutes regarding jurisdiction. Karen scoffed, her voice sharp. Your client? This isn't a courtroom. Amy turned to her, calm, unshaken. Correct, she said. Which is exactly why the HOA has no legal authority to penalize residents over public access property. You've issued warnings, fines, and even conducted inspections without jurisdiction. That's not maintaining order, that's misuse of power. The air went heavy. No one moved. Even the coffee cups on the back table seemed frozen mid-sip. Then, quietly, Amy flipped open a document and slid it across the table toward George. This, she said, is an official inquiry notice from the state attorney's office. It outlines potential violations under Florida's HOA Accountability Act. Continued harassment or false reporting could result in financial penalties or criminal investigation. George's color drained from his face. Karen's jaw dropped. We were just trying to maintain order, George stammered. Amy leaned forward slightly, her tone still measured but final. Order, she said, isn't maintained through intimidation. Karen opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The queen of the cul-de-sac, suddenly speechless. All around us, neighbors who'd watched her rule this street for years sat in stunned silence. By the end of the hearing, the board had no choice. They voted to rescind every complaint against me. George mumbled an apology before adjournment. Karen, red-faced and trembling, stormed out without a word. The next morning, her orange cone was gone. Her son's SUV? Parked neatly in their own driveway for the first time ever. And that spot, the one she'd tried to claim, was finally empty. Peaceful. Waiting for me. I pulled in, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a moment. No more cones. No fake violations. Just quiet. Because sometimes justice doesn't show up with sirens or flashing lights. Sometimes, it arrives in a neatly worded letter on official letterhead. Karen brought the HOA. But we brought the receipts. Subscribe to see what happens when ordinary neighbors stand up to extraordinary power. Then like the video if watching truth outshine intimidation felt right. And tell me in the comments, was this real justice, or just the calm before another HOA storm?